And so I've got the pleasure of introducing the three moms on our panel. All three are active in Adoption Network Cleveland's monthly birth mother support group, and we're thrilled to have them joining here this evening. So first, we've got Jean Bennett. Jean is a first mother whose life was profoundly shaped by the forced relinquishment of her child in the mid 1970s. For 46 years, she carried that loss as a secret, shaping her identity, relationships, and self worth. Now, in reunion with her son and his family, the process has been both deeply meaningful and emotionally complex. Sheila Kraus. Sheila has been a birth mother since she was 19 years old when she had to relinquish her daughter in 1992. She lives in Minneapolis with her husband and the two sons that they parent. And Maddie Ybarra, who's joining us from Texas. Maddie lives in the Dallas area. She relinquished her son 4 years ago in an open adoption, and she feels fortunate to have been connected to other birth moms very early after her relinquishment through groups like the Birth Mothers Group at Adoption Network Cleveland. So as I mentioned, our format's a little bit different this evening because we have a panel. So I'm going to be asking questions and giving each panelist a chance to respond if they'd like to. And as I mentioned, feel free to put any questions that come to mind for you into the chat as well. So we're going to go ahead and dive in. As we go, the three panelists, if you want to answer a question, just wave or just speak up if that seems appropriate as we go. So the first question is, what was the generational impact on your placement journey? Who'd like to answer that?
I was thinking Jean.
Yeah. Okay. All right, I'll start. Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for being here. I may get emotional while I speak, as my other birth mothers know this when I talk. But for me, the impact was on my forced placement journey. And, in 1976, I gave birth to my son, and there was choice at that time. However, that was not the choice for me, that I was going to birth my child and keep my child. Um, but society at that time, I think we looked at some mixed signals that were going on during that time. I know when I was a senior in high school, I was 19 when I gave birth. And when I was a senior in high school, there was one of my classmates who actually was pregnant and had gotten married during that time. Um, so there was still the stigma that, you were, you can call different names, but you were the bad girl. And yeah, it's in terms of when I was pregnant and when I, um, had told everybody involved in that situation, it was just my mother and the father of my child, who I'm married to now. And we weren't going to get married at that time, and my mother took control, and everything had to be a secret, and my father didn't even know, my siblings didn't know, and it was just I was sent away to live with a woman, and I couldn't tell anybody. I had to keep it a secret, but I always thought the whole time while I was living with this woman, I was going to keep my child. And I didn't know the name of the agency, and I don't remember signing the papers. So yeah, and I'll probably talk about that a little more when we get to some other questions. But there was a stigma involved that you weren't worthy, you weren't good enough, and that's kind of been that there for a long time. Anyway.
Thanks.
I'll
Sheila?
I'll go next. Um, I also placed my daughter when I was 19. It was 1992, so I was a freshman in college. Um, I my parents are boomers, so and there was no internet in 92, so I I wasn't able to do any like research about anything else, any other choices. My mom kind of like found the agency in the phone book, and that's how I ended up where I was. And and there was so since my parents were of like Jean's generation, basically, they had the same thoughts that it was like very shameful and I was an embarrassment to the family, and I nobody knew about the pregnancy, and I was sent away, as Jean was, to an apartment in another state that was owned by the agency, and that's where I lived for the until my daughter was born. Um, I didn't have any options because I didn't have any resources. I was, 19 and a freshman in college and living with my parents and didn't have a job, didn't have a way to get a job. And it was just kind of like, that's what's gonna happen. So, um, yeah, it's kind of about the same thing. It didn't seem like it changed in 20 years. So,
I think for for me as like a younger person, I was older when I relinquished my son. I was 24, and at the time, although my parents didn't have, my mom specifically didn't have any kind of personal relationship to people within adoption, that she had, this idea of adoption, especially more recently, as something that could be open and something that didn't have to look like shame or didn't have to look like guilt. And I think that the both of us, through ultimately relinquishing placement and an open adoption, she has taken on some of her own guilt and shame, and that, the impact of this decision, it's not just on me, it's not just on my son, it's affected our relationship, her relationship, and how she feels as a grandmother, something that she feels that she's been robbed of, and affected my familial relationships as well. So ultimately, I think that, to say that, is there a generational impact? Yes, of course. Could I tell you how far it's going to go? No, I don't think anyone can.
mm.
And I just
And your
tagged,
son,
I'm sorry,
I'm
go ahead.
sorry. Go ahead.
I just wanted to tag on what Maddie said in terms of, that generational. And I mean, it touches me to think, because for me, my mother sacrificed her first grandchild by doing that too, right? And having that secret and living with that secret, affected me and how I raised my beautiful family that you can see behind me. And just all of that. It does. It is generational, and it's, we need to break these generational curses that happen within our families.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that even further, like I have a granddaughter now from my daughter, and like I don't get to see her, and I'm not considered really a grandma to her, as much
Mhm.
as her other grandmothers. So and I have two sons that I'm raising, and it's kind of like, what does that say to them? Like they have a niece that they don't get to see, and that kind of stuff. So it's just yeah. I'm done.
Um, I'm going to ask you to talk about the general response or reaction that you encountered from people in your circles, your peers, your family, people at school or work, if they were aware about your adoption placement. Who'd like to go first?
I can go. I was pretty open. I didn't know that I was pregnant until I was in labor, so I didn't really tell anyone up until after placement, because it just was clearly a big shock, and I wasn't really ready to start having those conversations. And even when I thought I wasn't really because of people's kind of reactions to it. Um, it's interesting that I found, different people have different reactions based upon their individuality, right? Something that I thought I was going to come across more is that people younger or my age were going to have a more positive reaction, while people older were going to have a more, like, negative or confused reaction. And something interesting that I found is that pretty much everyone had the reaction of like, oh my gosh, like that's so selfless of you. And I remember very distinctly for the first year being that kind of being the only thing that I heard, is that, oh, it was just so selfless. Oh, you're just so strong. Oh my gosh, like I can't believe, like, what a big sacrifice you made, I think is mostly the reaction that I found.
And where did that land for you, hearing that?
In the beginning, it was very difficult. I didn't really know how to accept that information because it didn't feel like strength. And it did feel like sacrifice, but not in the connotation that I could clearly see that they were placing on it. Um, it wasn't probably until like year two that I started being like, oh, that's such a sweet sentiment. However, I didn't find that voice until much later on, because it's hard to fight that whenever you have such a big dog in the fight. It really is.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I didn't. Oh, sorry. I didn't tell anybody. I had two friends that knew at the time that I was pregnant for various reasons. And then I didn't tell anybody that I was pregnant. I basically hid in the house until I left to go to the other state. We would like drive around to malls that were really far away from our house because it's Minnesota, so we have lots of malls. But and then a couple years later, I my roommate found out that she was pregnant, and I ended up telling her because I'm like, well, this is what I did. Just kind of saying like, hey, there's this option out here that at the time, of course, I was under the same thing as Maddie, like, oh, because I had been told it was you did such a great thing. It was selfless, it was brave, blah, blah, blah. And so I told her about that. And then when her mom found out that she was pregnant, her mom was like, absolutely not. You will not place this child for adoption because she was forced to place her child for adoption in the 60s. So
Mm.
she had a completely different experience than I did. And I was like, oh, okay, so my friend did end up parenting her son. So those were the only people that knew until I was reunited. So then it was completely different after that. Everyone's like, oh, that was great. What a great thing. And I'm like, yeah, super great.
And so, when my secret came out and when I chose to tell people, everybody was like, oh, this is such a wonderful thing. It's so great that you found your son, right? That was number one. Number two, oh, you must be so happy that you found him and now you're in reunion with him. They don't use the word reunion, that you can have a relationship with him. But they fail to recognize that disenfranchised grief that we've held for so long and weren't allowed to mourn that loss. And they don't understand that you can hold two truths at the same time, right? That you still have that grief and that sadness because you weren't part of that person's life and raising that child and what they went through and the loss that it meant for your other children and the rest of your family, but then being happy too. So I mean, it's a balance. It's not easy to balance that
Mhm.
with it. So, and my one brother who um, when I told him, he was like, "Well, duh." Basically, where do you think you went for like 5 months? Like he kind of thought that is what happened, right? But it was never spoken. And I did say to him, "How come you never said anything to me?" He was a year and a half younger than me at the time, and he just said because it was none of my business.
Mm.
You know.
Mm. Okay, talking about generations, what's something that you've heard from another generation that's different from your experience?
I guess I can go first this time. Um, I was able to choose my daughter's parents, which I know is different from Jean's generation. So I met them and chose them pre-birth matching, and which I didn't know that was what was really going on at the time. Um, but yeah, I met them, chose them, and then I was promised like a little bit of openness, like, oh, you'll get updates, you'll have updates until she's 18, like monthly and yearly and stuff. And that did not happen. So that was fun. Um, and I wasn't really promised any other openness besides just updates. Like there was never a question about that. I was told that it would be confusing if I was in my daughter's life because how would she bond with her mother? Don't you want her to bond with her mother? And it was just it was I'll just say the word coercion. And I didn't realize it at the time that the whole pre-birth matching thing was like a way for them to be like, well, how could you now say no to these people? How could you keep your baby now that you've told them you were going to give them your baby? So that was a little bit different than genes, but not too much different. And then obviously I was never really given the option of a fully open adoption like there is now.
So you kind of sarcastically said that was fun that you didn't get the letters and pictures. You don't have to, but let me give you the opportunity to go into how that felt.
Um, well, it I was okay, so I was told that I would get updates once a month until she was a year old and then once a year after that. And after it happened, I was just so not emotionally prepared to see those pictures. And the agency was like, "Yep, you can get these anytime you want." And my mom and I we talked about it. Like I'm not ready to see them yet. And I waited until she was I think 4 years old before I felt like I was prepared to see pictures of her as a baby. Um, so then when I got them, it was very disappointing. I just had 3 months. I had like I think it's 3 months, 4 months, and 5 months, and that's all that was in my record or whatever, and nothing else. And she was already 4, and so we contacted the agency, and they're like, "Oh, well, there's nothing else in here, but we'll look," and then things happened, and agencies closed, and there was just nothing else. So, and they also promised me that when she's 18, she'll be able to find you if she wants. So then, of course, when she didn't find me when she was 18, I was like, oh God, she hates me. Um, but then I found out very recently that the state that she was born in, the original birth certificates were locked. I didn't know that was a thing when this happened. So then when I found out about it, like after I met her, I was like, well, that's crazy. Why did they tell me that you could find that stuff if that wasn't actually what could happen? So it just kind of
So,
compounded. I did not feel good about it. I felt very betrayed. And
mhm.
yeah, I'm actually still hurt about it, but it's okay. I'm trying to get over it.
So you thought she would be able to either get information from the state or from the agency that would make her be able to easily contact you when she was 18.
Yeah. And it was not true.
The records were closed. Yeah.
Yeah. And what they knew that they had been closed in that state since 1973 or 4. So in 92, they knew that they were still closed. So
Mhm. Um, how about for you, Maddie? What do you think was different about your experience than other generations?
Um, a lot. A lot was different and a lot was the same. I think the main difference in terms of how it interacts with my life now and the people who know that I placed is I find, kind of to build off of Sheila's point, that a lot of people that are a little older than I am often ask about how my son will feel about open adoption. Um, and obviously, I find that a very hard answer to give because he's 4, and also because I try to remind them as much as I feel like I can advocate for myself in these weird situations in like grocery market aisles and at work, is that um, they wonder if he's going to be confused. That's their main concern. It's like, oh well, if you're in his life, isn't he going to be confused? So again, the point that I tried to make there is that just like all birth mothers are not the same human, we share a lot of the same experiences, a lot of the same feelings. We all react to things differently. My son and adoptees in general are no different. So yeah, I mean, he might be confused. He might not be confused. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I can only assume and hear the voices that I hear as much and as often as I can. But ultimately, where I land, and it's not a pleasant answer for really anyone, is that I show up the best that I can, as much as I can, and I hope that the love that I share is felt and that I get some reciprocation, and a lot of that is out of my control. Um, and I think a lot of people's responses especially older, are like, well, I just don't understand that. I just don't understand that. And I have a hard time telling them I don't understand it either. But like I am just a cog in the system right now. I just have to be and hope. And that's all I've got.
Yeah, the thing about worrying that a child's going to be confused always puzzles me. Kids we have complicated families, and even in less complicated families, you have grandparents, you have other extended family members that I don't think kids get confused about what their roles are, but these days, a lot of kids have a step parent or, different people. And, if the adults are handling it, then the kid's going to handle it. But
I haven't had the courage to give the answer that I want to give quite yet, which is that I think that his confusion, either existent or non-existent, has a lot to do with the way that like his parents and I lead that relationship. But again, something that is very much out of my control. If it were in my control, he wouldn't be confused and we would all know and understand. But again, not within my control. And what is in my control, I do, and I show up. But yeah.
Thanks. How about for you, Jean? What do you think was different in your experience and other generations of birth mothers that you've seen?
Well, I think for me, it was the coercion piece. I mean, I still think there might be some of that still going on. I noticed somebody put in the chat about honesty, right? So the honesty piece of what's going to happen is not told. I think that's maybe that's more similar than anything else, but I think different. And I know, having this open adoption, which we didn't have or wasn't available during my time, I don't know how you can do that, right? I just, yeah, I find that that's a very difficult choice. And, just knowing what I've been through my experience to think about doing that as an open adoption today, it's like, wow, I don't think I can handle that emotionally. I mean, I think that would mess me up even more.
Well, and I think when they told me that, I think it was more of a way to keep me at a distance, like to not have me ask more questions and wonder about, is there a possibility that I could be more involved? Because, just saying, oh, you don't want her to be confused, do you? Well, of course I want the best for my child. I don't want anything harmful to happen to her. And that sounds horrible. Like, of course I don't want her to be confused. But I think it's also um, part of the adoptive parents' fear that we would be more involved than they would want us to be involved. And involved is a euphemism for other things right now. Linda knows what I mean. Just kidding.
Okay, our next question is the same question, kind of flip-flopped. So, what things have you heard from other generations that's the same as your experience, even over all the different years?
I think for me, it's that we all suffer in silence a lot, and that it's not something that has been really talked about until now. I think it's, the way society is now, that we can talk about it, but we've all suffered in our own silence, whether we kept it a secret or it was a choice for us, that we still suffer. It's a trauma. It's an event that causes trauma to us. And, I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that later in another question. But I think that's something that has happened to every mother.
Yeah, I think ultimately throughout, the wide array of first mothers, birth mothers, that I've met, is that we all think about our children, all love our children, all miss our children. And something that I have learned from them, from the older generations. I don't like older. I just don't like saying it. Something that I have really really learned from them is that despite my openness and despite people at work and my personal life, even in new relationships that didn't know me during placement, is that there is a fair level of disenfranchised grief, even in that openness. Someone knowing about it doesn't validate the grief, it doesn't acknowledge it. And I think that is where there's still a lot of work to be done from my perspective, is understanding how to acknowledge it in a way that doesn't minimize or like dehumanize the first mother.
And Maddie and I probably deal with this more. I can't remember, Jean, what if your son's adoptive parents are around anymore, but um like there's still, and this is going to sound really weird because I'm in my 50s, but there's still a power dynamic that's going on when I meet with my daughter. Like I I feel like I can't meet with her without her mom being there, and her mom has to have some sort of say about how any situation is going to happen, and has to like insert herself into any interaction that I have with my in-person interaction that I have with my daughter. So that is something that I don't think is different from any of the generations. Because even though I'm in my 50s, I feel like I'm 19 when I'm with them. So
Mhm.
Yeah, that's interesting, Sheila. So, unfortunately, my son's parents are not with us anymore. I would have loved to have met them. Um, they did a wonderful job raising him, and I think there's that guardedness by that child too to protect that part of their life and that relationship.
mhm.
That that's something they have to deal with, right? And how they're going to handle that, and talk to their families, or what part of their families are left there. So um, yeah, I can see that there's yeah, I think there would be some of that in a relationship, Sheila, in terms of power dynamics.
And I try to be very open with that with her mom when we're there, and but I feel like something's going on behind the scenes that I'm not aware of, because my daughter will say things to me and I'm just like, why, what? Like, of course your mom's going to be at your daughter's birthday party. Like, why? Of course she's going to be there. Why are you warning me that she's going to be there? Like, I know this, So it's just weird things that I don't really know, and I don't feel like I can ask about at this point. So, just kind of that weirdness, but
Yes, Linda Lee.
Okay. Um, so from your observation, in what ways, if any, has the adoption system made positive headway in more recent generations?
I
I,
think
I'll,
go ahead, Sheila. No, you
Yeah.
go.
mine's really quick. I feel like the adoptees themselves are doing the most to make the change in what's going on. And maybe that's just because of where I am and like the information that I receive, but it feels like most of it is coming from the adoptees. Like there needs to be change. Like they're not babies their whole life. They become adults and they need to be treated like adults. And I feel like that's where I see most of the positive change coming from. I don't yeah, like my the agency that I went through was corrupt, and the woman who was running it was indicted for embezzlement. So, I feel a little bit of not good about agencies. I know that there's not as many. I don't think there are as many, but I don't think that, I don't know. I feel like the adoptees are the ones that are going to make the change.
I completely agree. I think that's something that I see as an improvement, especially based upon hearing stories like Sheila's and Jean's, is that ultimately um, not much more information, but more information was presented to me. And I guess more options were presented to me, right? Like I can imagine that, Jean, the open adoption was not an option for you. Sheila, open adoption was presented to you as not really what an open adoption is, you know. I think that something that at least the agency that I placed through, and I can't say they get a lot of things right, but something that they did explain, I think, you know, fairly well to me is that there are different levels of openness. And, you know, they weren't very great at explaining, you know, the power dynamics at play there, and, you know, what I could do, and more accurately that there really wasn't much I could do to affect the openness or closeness of that relationship. However, um, closed and open were presented to me as options, and open adoption, I was aware that it could look so different. And although that doesn't feel like a big improvement, because it doesn't, I do think that more information is better in that situation. Even though it's not always accurate, I think more information is better.
And I think for me, I look at it as the adoption system, and the system was designed to work the way it works. And you know, some people hate hearing that babies are commodified, right? It's a commodity for people, that people are making money off of this. And that to me is a big issue, right? We're dealing with human beings, and it becomes, you know, someone's making money, the attorneys are making money off of it, the agency's making money off of it, and who suffers in the end, right? So, you know, some of the books people can read, The Primal Wound, which explains a lot. That's one of my favorites. You know, the body keeps the score, and what happens to our bodies through this. But, you know, positive headways, yes, being driven a lot by the adoptees. I think there needs to be more advocacy. I know some states now, people are able to get their documentation. I tried to get the document I supposedly signed almost 50 years ago, from Catholic Charities in Chicago and suburbs. And, you know, I kept getting the runaround back and forth, and nobody knew where the files were or anything like that. And yeah, so it's in that way, it's still working the way it was meant to work. And I think it really needs a lot of reforming. And like I said, I think people, the first mother, birth mothers, adoptees, and even adoptive parents, we all need to be involved. And also, as we say, the constellation, other people can advocate for this too. So siblings and aunts and uncles and friends, and ways that we can move it forward so it's not so trauma-ridden and not so money-driven, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Thank
Yeah, I
you.
don't have any of my signed papers either, Jane. I have nothing that I signed.
I don't remember signing any papers. Just saying.
Mm-hmm.
As an adoptee who's pushed change for lots of years, almost 40 years, one of the things that I've found repeatedly is that if I am using my voice as an adoptee, then legislators or other people are, oh, what about those poor adoptive parents? Or, oh, what about those poor birth parents? And so whenever possible, I've tried to go in with, you know, a small group that is representative of all the different sides. And then even still, they'll be like, oh, what about that birth mother that wouldn't dare come here, you know? So it's, you know, people's tendency to play kind of one side off another,
Mm-hmm.
I think, often. So all our voices are really important. Okay. What are some misconceptions that you've heard regarding adoption placements in your particular generation? So stereotypes or misconceptions or myths that you think are common.
Um, I think people thought that, like, I've talked to other birth moms around the same time as me, and it seems like people were given different options. Like, I know people who placed in the same year as me and have completely open adoptions. And I'm like, well, how come, like, why was that not an option for me? And I think just because of the time of, you know, the early 90s and just not having that information readily available, I think some people knew the information and some people didn't. So I think, you know, it gets kind of mixed up now that people are like, oh, well, there were options then. And I'm like, well, I didn't personally have those options.
Mhm.
So that's kind of my thing, is that I think people thought that because it was post baby scoop era and post Roe v. Wade that um I had all these options available to me and I chose this. And it's like, well, okay, that's not how I felt though, because I was doing research in the libraries and like it's not gonna you're not gonna find that. I love libraries, don't get me wrong, but in the early 90s you weren't gonna find information like this, that you would need like that there.
Mhm.
I think for a lot of people my age, the misconception about open adoption is the level of openness. Like I often have friends who, even if they know, more intimate details about my relationship with my son and his parents, they'll ask things like, oh, well, when do you get to take him? Or, what are you going to do with him whenever you see him next time? Or, they treat it almost like I'm a step parent, that he's going to be sent to me and we're going to go do all these great things. And something that I think people are really shocked to learn is that I've, been in this open adoption relationship with them for 4 years now, and I have yet to have any time alone with my son ever. I think that's something that people are very like shocked by, for sure. They just don't see it that way. They have this idea of what an open adoption looks like. And it's sunshines and rainbows and family vacations and love, 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 love. And it's just, I would say that most of the time it's not like that.
And I would think that also with the open adoption, a lot of people think that, oh, once you have this signed agreement, that's just it. Well, there isn't really a signed agreement. It's not legally binding in most cases. So even though you start as an open adoption, what happens to those? Most of them close.
Yeah,
And
I do have to share that with people. They tell you, especially when I signed that, it's a contract of the heart. That's
mhm.
literally what they call it. And as most of us know, those hearts are fickle, especially whenever there's a perceived threat.
And I think for me, the misconception, and I'm going to reference Laura Engel's book, is you'll forget this ever happened to you. Um, y- you never forget that, right? No, you can never forget it. Um, yeah, and just that you're doing the best, right, for the baby. Those were things in my generation that people would say, it's the best for the baby, or, you know, you're a loose woman or whatever. They want work terminology they wanted to call you, and that when they had no idea, right, who you were or what was going on.
You'll just be able to move on, Jean.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to announce this later, but since you brought up Laura Engel, Laura's our speaker next week. So if people want more information about birth mothers and want to hear from a birth mother from the 60s, you'll get your chance next week. So you can see more about that on our website.
Oh.
Well, thank you very much. You just made my week by quoting that. Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for being here with us tonight as well.
It's my pleasure. I love hearing from all of you.
Okay, can you talk a little bit about how this impacted your mental and emotional health over the years? Maybe how that unfolded, if there's different stages that you've gone through, anything you'd like to share?
Well, since I kind of brought this topic up, I'm happy to share that, because I think there's such a physical toll it takes on your body that keeping this inside and not being able to express it, a couple of things, I truly believe happened to me. I had to get some stents in 23, and I believe it just in one, my LAD, which is what they call the widowmaker. I believe that was caused from holding my grief in my heart and going through EMDR therapy and other therapies. That was the one thing, the semantic piece of that the therapist always asked me, where are you feeling it? And it was always in my chest, always in my chest. And I think it affects you in terms of how you raise your children. And I have my beautiful family behind me here. And I raised my son, my second son, and my daughter, and this is the first time they were all together, which brought so much joy to my heart. But I know how much it affected all of them, right? To not know that. But yeah, it takes a toll physically and mentally.
I totally forgot what I was going to say. Move on. Sorry. I had it in my head and then I was like, no, I'll maybe remember it in a minute.
Um, I mean, I think that it's fair to say, um, despite anything that happened previous to relinquishment, relinquishment is the thing that does and will impact my mental and emotional health the most for the rest of my life. Because it's not something that the best way that I put it, oftentimes, like especially to my therapist, bless her, is that, you know, in hearing the kind of relationship that I have and have to have, you know, with people who control access to my son and the relationship that we have, if they were to hear about how that relationship is going, in any other instance, they would advise me to step away. Like they would say, like, oh, this is probably not great for you. This is, you know, this person isn't treating you well, or this is affecting your mental state too much. And whenever stepping back is not a choice, that reminder is with you all of the time. That, you know, whether the choice is real or perceived, a lot of the times when first mothers are facing this unplanned pregnancy, or, you know, even if it's a planned pregnancy, there are people end up in this situation often, more often than we think. um, it's not really a choice. um, it's presented as one, but ultimately there's a level of coercion that's happening, you know, most of the time. And so especially in being in an open adoption, that lack of choice, even though it is presented as an option, it re-traumatizes you in small ways over and over and over again.
I do remember what I was going to say. It affected me also then when I was having my kids that I parent. Um, I felt like I wasn't worthy to be their mother because I wasn't
Mhm.
able to mother my first child. Even though it was like 18 and 20 years later that I had these two boys, it was really hard for me to feel like I was worth it. So,
Yeah, Sheila, I relate to that too, right? We weren't worthy to be to be mothers, right? And you live with that. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up too is I had talked about it's Bessel van der Kolk's book on, you know, how the body keeps the score. When I gave birth to my second son, my labor just stopped once his head was out. And the doctors were yelling at me, push, push. But my body was like, I think, you know, I didn't recognize this till going through therapy. That was my body telling me they're going to take this child from you too.
Hmm.
Jean, by the time that I, you know, got to the hospital, I was fully 10 centimeters dilated, because I remember thinking, like, I'm not ready for this to happen yet. I'm not ready for this to happen yet.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's hard to move on from all that.
Yeah.
So those were our prepared questions. We do have a few questions that were submitted from audience members when they registered. So we're going to walk through those and we'll see how much time we have for questions. If there's any time left after that, we could talk all night, right?
Yeah.
So, so one question that we got from someone who signed up was expressing that as the child of a birth mother, and the way I took this question was both the children that were being parented by that mother and the children that that mother placed for adoption. How do you suggest that they encourage their mother to get support?
Yeah, this hit home to me because I have a situation in one of my relatives that I know, um, that she probably hasn't been to therapy yet, but I think as a first birth mother, you have to deal with that trauma. It's not going to go away, and it just gets worse and wreaks more havoc on you to do that. So, I mean, I would say number one, invite them, let them know about our birth mother support groups, to come to those, to listen to the open meetings and hear from adoptees. That's been very beneficial, and that they really need they need to deal with the trauma. You have to. You can't. I mean, I don't know a birth mother that hasn't that I've been in contact with.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I've been to therapy and other talking to other people, and I think the best thing that has helped me actually is the birth mom support group. And I'm not just saying that because we're on this Adoption Network Cleveland thing. I we've created this support group of women that we can contact even when we're not doing the monthly meetings. Like we all, you know, we support each other when we know we're going through hard things. And like if we know someone's going to be visiting their son or daughter, we ask them how it went or support them before they go. Like I had a dinner with my daughter like 2 years ago, and I got texts from like three of you that night going, how did it go, how did it go? And I was like, oh my gosh, I don't remember. But yeah, I think that was. And then obviously therapy, if they can get into an adoption, what's the word, trauma adoptee competent therapist.
Yes,
Thank you.
definitely.
That would be the best thing.
Somebody that has background in the adoption constellation, definitely.
Adoption competent. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think in general, if you're wanting to encourage a first mother, birth mother to seek out help, I don't think that you'll find any first mother who doesn't have love for their child. And I think that if framing it as in like, I want you to have a better relationship with me. Like if you're the child asking your birth parent to seek help, it all starts with I want to have a better relationship with you. I want you to have a better relationship with me. But I feel like there needs to be we need more help than just us two can provide. And I think that is probably the best encouragement that you can give any first mother, is to let them know that that's the best way that they can show their love to their child.
That's really great. Thank you. Another question we got from an audience member, I'm going to generalize this a little bit. The person asked if you felt that Catholic Charities, but I'm going to broaden that to any agency that, whatever agency that you worked with, used coercion methods to get you to surrender your child. And I know this came up a little bit through your other answers, but if you have more to share or specific examples, this is the time.
Yes.
Yes. I really generally, I think that agencies and organizations are set up to coerce either overtly or covertly, and a lot of that has to do with how a lot of adoption professionals view adoption and how they let those perceptions show up in their line of work despite whatever the facts are. Yeah, I think, of course, there's coercion. I think that you'd be hard pressed to find an adoption that happens that doesn't have some kind of element of it.
So a question I'd like to ask because of that question is, why aren't there agencies out there that actually help women to keep their children?
Because that doesn't make anybody money, Jean.
Ah, there you go. There you go.
That was my semi-sarcastic but true answer.
I know.
And there's not the social systems put in place for that because we don't, our government doesn't want us to pay for that. So yes, they do use coercion. Anything else?
Okay. Our sisters.
Yeah, saving our sisters,
Saving our sisters.
Does help that, but yeah.
Small grassroots support network. Yeah, can't save every sister probably because there's just too many, right? And then the last question that I have, and we'll see if we have time for any others. What type of relationship would you want with the adoptive family, and how should that be forged?
Um, I think I would just like a little bit more honesty. I feel like every time I see my daughter's adoptive dad passed away this past summer. And he also had Parkinson's. So even when I did interact with him, it was harder for him to express himself. But the first time I met him when we were in reunion, like he gave me like the best hug and he cried. And my daughter was like, he never cries about anything. And I was like, oh, okay. So even then I felt like I had a little bit more of a connection with him. Um, but then my daughter's mother has just done some weird power dynamic, weird things that have kind of made it difficult for me to feel comfortable around her. And I try really hard. My daughter jokes about my Midwestern, like, you want to have everybody like you. And I'm like, yeah, I do. And I have that, like all of us Midwesterners are like, yeah, everybody likes us because we're neat and we're nice. And so and she's like, I don't think that's going to work on everybody. I'm like, but it does work on everybody. But it doesn't. And her mom's like from the same state as me, so it's just weird that we don't have this. But I think a lot of it has to do with her not feeling comfortable, and it makes me kind of upset that her uncomfortableness then affects the relationship that I'm trying to have with my daughter. So I wish that she would get therapy. I just feel like I suffer from her not understanding what's going on, kind of. And I feel like if everyone just kind of figured out their own stuff, we could all come to the table on the same, kind of level playing field, I guess.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think really honesty is at the root of what I wish um that my relationship specifically with my son's adoptive parents looked more like. Um because again, to Sheila's point, everyone coming to the table, with it together. I think that is probably too much to ask of clearly broken people on both sides. I think even if you come with your brokenness, that is better, far better, than pretending like everything's fine and dandy. Because ultimately, I think that empathy would reach farther. I think that I have a really hard time as someone. I would like to consider myself fairly empathetic to everyone, but I find it very hard sometimes to have empathy for um, the pain and the struggle that clearly is present in adoptive parents. Um, and I think that more honesty about what that pain and struggle looks like for them, it will help me offer that empathy. I mean, I think that openness just as a human, from human to human, not adoptive parent to first mother, um, or whatever part you play in the constellation. Um, I think it helping us understand each other is ultimately where that begins, that better relationship begins. It's not necessarily coming with your healed and healthy self. And honestly, that's probably not available to a lot of birth mothers who place. They didn't place out of for no reason, it's not
Uh,
because we were healthy and able and willing. Um, yeah, I think more honesty, and I do think that it's both parties, all parties relationship to forge that bond. However, in knowing that adoptive parents hold a lot of power in that dynamic, I do think that it's important to them, it's important for them to initiate as much and as often as possible. And when they do, I think that opens the door for first parents to feel more comfortable doing the same for them.
Mm-hmm.
I would add maybe even if they're not getting a response or the response that they hoped
Yes,
for, to keep,
absolutely.
yeah.
Well, and I like what you said too, like just being honest about your brokenness. Like I understand that, not being able to have your own children is traumatic. I understand that. And 'cause I went through infertility myself after my daughter, which I thought was a punishment, but we won't get into that. And I just feel like there's no open communication. I feel like whenever I see her mom, there's an act being put on, and I'm just like, why can't we just sit down with ourselves and just talk about what's really going on instead of like going around the what's going on. And I feel like she puts a lot of pressure on my daughter to treat me a certain way, like not get too close to me. Like there have been times where she's openly said things like anyway, but it's it's kind of like just I guess I don't understand why it has to be that way. Like why can't we just come to the table and just talk?
Okay. So there was lots and lots of chat, and I will make sure that you all get the chat. There was, according to Nikki, who's been watching for questions for me, only one real question. I saw a lot of different emotions and thoughts flying by, but the question is actually a really good one to end on. So at the risk of going over a couple minutes, I'm going to ask it. So the question is, how do you reconcile the mixed emotions? Or begin to reconcile?
I have
Go ahead,
a
Maddie.
have a really bad answer, unfortunately. I don't think that you do reconcile them. I think that you have to let them exist in their own right, in their own space, together. I think that these emotions that are so completely opposite are not meant to be reconciled. And I think that a lot of us get stuck in that trap of being like, I'm going to make this a positive experience. I'm going to find something good to come out of this. Because your brain really, 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 really wants that, to make it worth it, or to make this big pain have some kind of purpose. And it's okay that it doesn't, and it probably shouldn't. And also something that I think all of us, all of the birth mothers I have met, that we try to internalize is that despite this big pain, that there is still lots of life to live, and that we still deserve a fulfilled and happy life. But we do have to carry that pain with us in order to get there. It's not something that meshes. It's truly something that you carry forever.
So the both and instead of the either or, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and acknowledging that this is hard and it's not all rainbows and unicorns, and just being like, I don't know. I just think honesty is the best policy here.
Yeah. But Maddie, you are wise beyond your years. You're a wise young woman. And I would have to say, yeah, you can't reconcile it. You have to learn to hold them together, right? And that's hard. That's work. It takes work to do that. Because one minute you're crying, the next minute you're happy about something, and it's that the yin and the yang of it going back and forth. So
work all the time, forever. It never stops.
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to wrap things up. Like I said, we could totally talk for probably 3 more hours. But I just want to thank the three of you tremendously. You've shared so much, and I could tell just from the volume of comments as I skimmed them how much the audience got out of this. So thank you. And we do continue this theme with birth mothers next week as well. As I mentioned, Laura Engel is going to be with us. She's the author of You'll Never Forget This, You'll Forget This Ever Happened, Secret Shame and Adoption in the 1960s. She's going to be talking about family secrets, so very apropos to the things that we're discussing. Thank you to everybody who joined us this evening, and to our panel for sharing so much and volunteering your time to be with us this evening. Adoption Network Cleveland is a nonprofit organization serving individuals, families impacted by adoption, kinship, and foster care with support, education, and advocacy. We are a membership organization, so you can check out our website if you're interested in joining and helping to support our programs. Thank you for the people that made the donations when they were signing up for this evening as well. And please join us for any or all of our programs going forward. I know this is such an emotional topic and there's lots of support available. So thank you. And thank you again to Nikki and to Kirsten for organizing this evening in this dynamic conversation. So